Good morning and welcome to the Church Development Foundation presentation on Church Capital Campaign Strategy, different is better. Now, I offer this subject because we have been in the Church Capital Campaign business for more than 30 years, and between Daryl Prater and I, we have got many decades of experience, and we would like to give this information to you so that as you plan your church capital campaign, you are equipped to make the best possible decision to serve your unique parish in the best possible way. I'm Dennis Green, the founder and president of Church Development, and joining me today is my co-worker, Daryl Prater. Daryl, thank you so much. Please introduce yourself and say a little bit about yourself.
My name is Daryl Prater. I've had the privilege of working with Church Development and Dennis Green since 2007, so a little over 15 years. I've been in full-time ministry of some sort since I was in my mid-20s. I have a background in church music and as an associate pastor, and I love this work and stewardship. I feel like it definitely makes a difference, and it's a real privilege to engage churches and hopefully bring out their very best and how we're able to partner with them.
Thanks, Daryl. Great to have you here. Just so you all who are viewing should know, Daryl is the rock star of church development. He gets the best outcomes, and he is a supreme professional. Now, we want to give you this information, and you feel free to share this with other people. You'll get a copy of it via email at our conclusion. Feel free to share this with anyone. Our agenda today has these 4 items. The idea of different is better is just based on the preconceived notion that we should learn from our mistakes. Not a new idea, but it's very important to us. We collect data from the past 30 years. And our book, The Stewardship System, which I'll give to you for free. Send me an email, I'll send you the book. It's full of case studies and statistics, both about what works, best practices, as well as what inherent mistakes to avoid. I feel very fortunate to be part of the 4 Pillars Collaborative, which is made up of a strategic planning, a bank finance expert in church financing, an architectural firm that's all about design, and us, the fundraising team. And it's a free voluntary collaborative in which we just share our information so that you can avoid the mistakes that other churches have made before you. Let me know if you're launching a product and I can connect, not a product, but a facility process. And I can connect you with these experts, and it costs you nothing to get their wisdom. So today's agenda will have these 4 subjects: the old paradigm, which is defined by a singular word, pressure. It has some negative outcomes. The new paradigm, which has emerged, significantly powered by the research from Villanova University and a researcher named Zach, who is one of my heroes, that addresses failure analysis, what to not do. Number 2, we'll talk about the new paradigm, which is based deeply in scripture about engagement and prayer. One of our heroes in this regard is Scott Peck, the author of The Road Less Traveled. He also wrote a book on community building called The Different Drum. That research, along with the person who won the Nobel Prize for Behavioral Economics, Daniel Kahneman, gave us some insight in the right way to move ahead when you're serving your parish and developing a new facility project. In the 3rd section, we'll really drill down and talk about how specifically different is better. You could be doing damage by employing the old method. I think I used to work as a car mechanic in high school and college. Cars from the 60s and 70s that I learned to drive on, they were good and they got us around, but they are nowhere near as safe or as efficient as cars today. And I use that as a parallel, a metaphor or analogy, just to, things have changed. We have learned from our mistakes. It is important as we serve the church to devote ourselves to being good stewards of the church and our resources and doing the best to serve the church. So in section 4, you will learn specific action items that you can address immediately. Okay, so let's leap into action. We hope that you come out of this with an action plan for your congregation. Okay, so our first section that we're going to discuss, well, I need to give you a little background. We've been around since 1992 when we've raised a ton of money. We're different from other capital campaign consultants. We base our work on scripture, but we also include a lot of research. The ask is based in prayer and pressure. We do 3 years of follow-up, and we help you with plan giving and offertory. Our work is based in scripture. This is my favorite. And we collect this data and then we give it away, and we borrow freely from other corporate and nonprofit resources. All right, so let's talk about the old paradigm of pressure. And Daryl, I will ask you in a minute to just reflect upon your work at St. Peter's. We are in the midst of managing, I believe, the 5th campaign in the past 25 years. And the previous 4 campaigns have been conducted by the old paradigm, which just looks exactly like this: A, B, C, D, and E. Matter of fact, yesterday Daryl and I were in a meeting discussing why the previous capital campaign had such a low level of pledge collection. Well, frequently, that is one of the negative outcomes of the old paradigm pressure. And just to summarize, that old paradigm is each individual is asked for a pledge that is 5 times what they give on an annual basis. The pledge card is already filled out. A volunteer or staff member visits every home, hands them the pledge card and says, "I'll wait while you sign it." Daryl, do you remember? It might have been 5 years ago, you and I were in the office and our accounting person, Jackie, came in with her letter from this parish. Do you remember what she said?
I do. In fact, she thought that you and I were in charge of that campaign, and she was really upset with us.
I totally remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you
But
remember
it wasn't us.
Thank goodness. Thank goodness it was. Do you remember the words she used to describe you fundraiser?
Fundraisers, yeah, you're all alike.
Oh, she said, "This is so rude. I'm so offended.
Right,
Why do you
right.
think you could just tell me what to do and get me to sign that?" I remember that.
Yeah, that was not good.
Yeah, I have great admiration for her and her husband, who are lifelong members of this parish. And it took a moment before we could get a word in edgewise and say, we have not been retained by St. Peter's to manage this campaign. So I suspect the parish has employed a firm that uses the old paradigm, which is put a big amount down, divide and conquer. Don't do community building, just do one-on-one. And if it was a basketball metaphor, it would be one-on-one, person-to-person defense where there is no escape. It really is hardcore fundraising. It is high-pressure siding sales. And another interesting phenomenon is that the consultants who employ that really feel like one size fits all. And it doesn't work. So right now, go ahead, Daryl.
Sorry, I just was thinking that that kind of pressure, the sole focus of a capital campaign is on the money, as
Right.
opposed to other things that are really more important. I mean, the money is important, but engagement, volunteerism, some things that we'll get to. But it's not just about the money in these capital campaigns.
Daryl, thank you so much for saying that. Like, I look at my parish. Yes, I give generously to offertory. Yes, I give when there's a capital campaign. That's not the number one thing on my mind. I mean, my parish is my community that has kept me and my family afloat through hardships. It has been the focal point of the greatest joys of our lives, from baptisms and marriages. It is that community that is the most important thing. And related to that, just tied to that, is the spiritual path that each one of us is on. And each of us, when you do a capital campaign, you have a choice. You can bring the heat. It's, I believe it is the easiest way to conduct. I mean, doing a capital campaign that is different takes a little bit more work and a little bit more time, but golly, it doesn't cost any more money. It's just like gardening. You got to plan ahead a little bit. And I think we ought to respect that the purpose of a parish, is to facilitate our spiritual growth. So why can't a capital campaign be based in prayer and spirituality? Why does it have to be high pressure? It doesn't have to be. Now, I'm a crusty old man. I am a delicate flower on the inside, and I don't want those outcomes. I don't want people to be mad at my parish or my church at large. I don't want to lose members, and I don't want the offertory to decrease as well. So St. Peter's had all of those negative outcomes. I remember when the pastor recently was introducing you and me to a group of leaders in that building on the left, the glass building on the left, just a couple of weeks ago. And do you remember what he said, Daryl, when he introduced us? They hired church development because of what?
We're different.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And he had a bad taste in his mouth from the last capital campaign. He said when they presented their way of facilitating community engagement and prayer and discernment, I was sold. That's what I want. And then we shared with them a list of over 100 other parishes similar to his who have gone through this, who have raised the most amount of money possible, and offertory increased, and planned gifts came in. He said, well, that's what we would like to do. So now let's shift to the new paradigm, okay? Engagement in prayer. And I made a mistake on this slide. It says case study St. Peter's, but it's really Prince of Peace. So forgive me for that mistake, and we'll talk about Prince of Peace. The new paradigm is engagement in prayer. So we want to plan ahead, just like gardening. It only takes a little bit of planning, just a little bit in advance, and we can engage people in decision making. SurveyMonkey can be used for free, and if you pay for it, it is a modest sum, but it allows you to have a widespread set of opportunities to solicit input from people as you're making decisions. Now the building that you're looking at right here will be expanded. They're going to put a new foyer on the front, and there will be new offices. And right now the foyer is the size of a phone booth, like the church I grew up in. And they know that a narthex ought to be 1/3 the size of the worship space, because that's where the social interaction goes on. This has taken them a little bit of time to ask for input. Then they engaged a wonderful architectural firm to help them think through options, present them back, and they were brilliant. The pastor there, Father Paul Colling, is, in my opinion, a genius and a saint, because he wanted to get input and he wanted to make it fun. So let's have a series of parties. And that is just, it has been magnificent. The parish has really come together socially to reconnect it, particularly now, as after COVID. Darryl, tell me about your thoughts and feelings about engagement in the post-COVID era. Are people ready to connect again?
Oh, yes. In fact, St. Peter's Parish, that was really made clear on the feasibility study that people were ready to get back. They missed the face-to-face interaction. They missed, having a full church during Mass, and so that really is even more of a focus for us at St. Peter's to, bring the church back post-COVID. So yeah, churches are ready to get back. They had to wait a long time, and now they're ready to get back.
Yeah. Now, if we work together, if we work with your church, we're going to want to engage members in decision making right off the bat, doing a feasibility study. So when we do it'll be an set of interviews with 30 leaders, a cross section of the congregation, and then a survey, monkey survey, that goes out to everyone. And our report is like a book. It just has an enormous amount of detail in it. And when you ask everybody for their input, they share it with you, and then that allows us to tailor the campaign based on the unique personality of your congregation. One size doesn't fit all. Parishes are just like human beings. They're all unique individuals. So we really have got to tailor that. And we discovered, how we should proceed with those social activities, and what other information do people want, what other decisions do they want to be involved in. And we ask them, would you be interested in being a volunteer? Now, Daryl, do you mind talking for a minute, going back to St. Peter's? How did we do when we asked people? Do we get anybody to volunteer?
Yeah, we had over 50 who said that they would be willing to serve on one of the campaign teams. And so that's kind of a starter list, of the volunteers. We want to build on that group. So with a parish like St. Peter's, hopefully we would have 75 to 100 volunteers serving on very short-term basis, but nonetheless being engaged and involved.
Yeah, that's fantastic. The best-selling management book of all time was Good to Great, which studied 11 publicly traded companies between 1965 and 2000 that outperformed the market by a factor of 8 to 1. And then these researchers went in there and just dug in to find out, what are these firms doing differently? And they discovered that they were not the old-fashioned hierarchical dictatorship of old. Rather, they espoused a thing called management by wandering around. A high level of input and engagement works in the corporate sector. It also works in church capital campaigns. So we want to abide by those best practices in organizational development to serve the church, because in my opinion, that's the most important institution that we're involved in today. And Lord knows the world needs healthy spiritual institutions at the moment. So item C, we want to focus on prayer and discernment. Now, part of the research that came out of Villanova, and Charles Zeck, in his book, Why Catholics Don't Give, discovered that there is a real resentment for that high pressure ask of a specific dollar amount. That Villanova research said that the best ask is a percentage ask. So we began experimenting with the percentage ask about 15 years ago, and we discovered that the rate of angry members dropped from about 20% to less than 1%. And to me, that might be the most important research we have discovered. Now, from a macroeconomic perspective, if you really drill down on that 3%, just using a Catholic example, the average Catholic gives about 1% of their income to their church. The average Protestant gives about 2%. So if we're asking people to give 3% of their income each year for the next 3 years, or a one-time gift of 3% of their assets in a one-time gift, we're really asking them to triple their current level of giving, and that's just to the capital campaign. That is an enormous ask. Now, we ask for it, we ask for a percentage, and then immediately we say, we would like you to take this matter to prayer and discernment. So take this to your daily time that you spend with God in prayer and discuss your decision with God. Daryl, do you mind talking for a moment about the prayer and discernment guide that a typical one of your parishes might enlist, the time and the tool for prayer and discernment?
Sure. The prayer and discernment time frame is 2 weeks before Commitment Sunday. And then the 14th day, if you will, then would be on Commitment Sunday. So the prayer team within the team structure, they're going to encourage some level of prayer all through the capital campaign, but these 14 days are going to be really intentional. And there will be something provided by the prayer team for each of those days. So Dennis is referring to sometimes called a prayer guide, which has a little reflection and a prayer, but it's something intentional that parishioners or congregants could start their day with. Sometimes the prayer guide is in the form more of a prayer calendar. So it's laid out a little bit differently. It could be a reflective thought and a prayer. It could be some questions that are thought provoking to be in your mind, being prayerful about throughout the day. But it really makes a difference to go through this prayer and discernment time. And that, again, is about prayer and not pressure, as Dennis mentioned early on in this presentation.
Thanks, Daryl. And tell me about the authors of each page of that prayer and discernment guide are who?
The authors are usually parishioners within the church, within the parish. It may be some of the prayer team, but it's another layer of getting folks involved in engagement. We had one church, Christ Church Anglican, a few years ago that decided that they would have more of personal testimonies. And so they engaged various people throughout the church to share a testimony, and then there was a particular scripture and prayer that was part of that theme. So there's different ways to do it. Always important to engage people in this kind of resource.
Thank you, Daryl. Now that's one of those resources we can give you for free. If you would like to take this and do this as part of your annual stewardship, just give me or Daryl a call or an email, and we can send you a template that you can use to modify and replicate using your own volunteer authors. Now, D on your slide, each parish is different. Daryl, in the past 30 years, we've worked with more than 200 campaigns. So if you just look at the 100 parishes that you have worked with, are any two of them exactly alike?
No, in fact, that's one of the aspects of church development that drew me to wanting to work with Dennis and church development, is that we are different. We have the flexibility to customize. And so therefore, as we do active listening and we customize and tailor the capital campaign, there's no two churches alike out there. And so no two church capital campaigns are alike if we're a part of the customizing.
Yeah, and that's really enjoyable. It makes our job very fun. It's full of variety, and we're always curious, how is this parish going to be different from the last one, and what can we do that's unique, and makes our job very fun. It is a pleasure. And item E, it is a joy to see those outcomes immediately, and they are counterintuitive. To know that we've just, like Prince of Peace, we raised several $millions, and in the same breath, at the same moment, their weekly giving had a significant increase. It had so much of a significant increase that they budgeted that elevated level of giving would continue through the next year. And it has. So from a purely fundraising perspective, one would say, well, let's do this new paradigm just because we get more money. Yes, that is part of the equation, but a more important part I would offer is that attendance going up. That's extraordinarily important. Volunteering increase, and as well as offertory, as well as we raise the most amount of money. Daryl has just not long ago hit a home run. He raised 7 times annual giving for St. Anne's Parish. And the norm for a modest campaign might be 2 to 3 times annual giving. Commerce Bank gave us a spreadsheet of the last 40 church loans that they have made, and the typical project was 4 times annual giving. The typical debt was 2.5 times annual giving. The typical capital campaign produced 1.5 times annual giving. So right away, we know if that's Commerce's data bank and they look at 1.5 times annual giving, and Daryl just raised 7 times annual giving, this is one more reason to acknowledge, Daryl, you're awesome, and thank you. And I sure enjoy being a coworker of yours.
Well, thank you. Dennis, I'm also reminded of a church just about a year ago. We worked with Holy Trinity in the Kansas City metro area, and we were charged to run their 4th debt campaign. So they had some pretty significant campaign fatigue. They had raised $2 million in their 3rd campaign. But with the added engagement, which was a welcome component, people really responded to that. They raised $3.5 million in the campaign that we led, and also they got a significant bump, about 20% in their annual giving. So that's part of that counterintuitive factor that Dennis mentioned. But the engagement makes such a big difference.
Right, and here is the slide from Holy Trinity. And Father Mike was really burnt out from his previous capital campaign 3 years earlier, where early on, as we were discussing, perhaps working together, he described to us how the previous capital campaign was composed of him and the consultant. And together they went door to door to door to door to door. And he was really burnt out by that. It took an extraordinary amount of time, and it was painful, and it had all the negatives that we talked about before. So he was very intrigued when we talked about, well, what's it like to do these community social connecting events and then have a decision to give based in prayer and not pressure. He was very intrigued. Tell me more about that. And he called our references and discovered, wow, it does actually work. Let's give this a try. And then when the numbers came in, he was shocked. How could that old paradigm only raise 2 million? And we're at 3.5, and we haven't even started asking for planned gifts, estate gifts. So he was in shock and joy. And I would say that is a perfect illustration. Now we're drawing to a close, but that is a perfect illustration, Daryl, of how different equals better. I mean, it worked dramatically.
Right. Dennis, I might just mention just very quickly, one of the campaign teams is an advisory committee. That's an information sharing group, but it also is an opportunity for parishioners to give feedback and to help guide the campaign. And I think the church was amazed that there were over 50 that attended those advisory committee meetings. And that was a sign of people really responding to engagement.
Well, Daryl, if you don't mind, I'd like to brag on you just a little bit more. As Daryl led that engagement, he asked the pastor, would you like to do a little bit of research before we form the advisory committee? And the pastor was unaware of the professional public information that was out there about donors to other charities. And the pastor was curious to find out more. So Daryl conducted the research and found out that among the membership, there were numerous people who had the capacity for $1 million donations and had made significant gifts to other charitable organizations. And this was just a gentle hint about who might we consider inviting to serve on that advisory committee. This was a marvelous idea. So I remember attending one of those dinners with a family, a couple that gave $100,000 per year to a nearby university. And through no pressure, no asking, just engaging, inviting them to a dinner and a dialogue. Their offertory gift increased immediately to match their gift to that other charity of $100,000. And that was before they made their capital campaign gift. That was fantastic. So Daryl, again, kudos for a smashing success, really embracing a new paradigm, being scientific, being professional, being comprehensive, and tailoring it to the unique perspective of that parish. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. I appreciate that. One comment that's really a clarification. If you're on the webinar, I want to really drive home that all of these volunteer opportunities within the capital campaign, they're very short term. We refer to them as episodic volunteer opportunities. So it's not a commitment for 6 months or a long-term commitment, but it's meaningful. It's worth their time. Their time is valued, and they're engaged. But it's a very short-term commitment.
That's great, Daryl. Thank you. Now, the wisdom behind that comes from the Gallup polling instrument titled the ME25. You can look it up. You can learn from it. One of the things they learned was that only 15% of your congregation is willing to serve on a standing committee over time. 50% are modest participants, and the outer 35% you will see very rarely. So we don't really worry about that inner 15%. We worry about the outer 85%. And what can we do to draw them closer to the congregation? And what Daryl just talked about, the episodic volunteer opportunity, is just a little bit magical. So the moment a person says, yes, I'll be on a committee for 2 meetings, that's fine. That's all we need you. All of a sudden, they make some new friends. They get involved. They make something happen. They see an impact, and they never go back. They become volunteers for life. And that is the most exciting thing, because it's all about that community. It's all about, we are woven together in the fabric of our parishes. That's just so important. And that facilitates the internal, the spiritual dialogue and the spiritual discernment, which is really the most important thing that we can do. Going back to 1 Peter 4:10, God's blessed us with everything that we have. It's up to us to figure out, now what do we do to make the world a better place? So different is better. Following, I just heard a webinar the other day about Aristotle's framework for making a case. Aristotle said, you need to begin with the why, the values, then you go on to logic, but you really got to tell the story. So the values that this new approach embraces is engagement is very important because it increases the fabric strength of your parish. B, it's critical to each individual because this is a time of deliberate discernment. So the pastor's ask is not, will you give me money? The pastor's ask is, would you please pray your way through a decision? Every pastor likes that. And if a person does actually follow the prayer guide and discern their way through it, whatever answer comes out at the end, you know for sure that is the right answer. And we're going to be very gentle about that. At the same time, expecting, like Daryl's track record, that we're going to raise the most record-breaking amount of money possible. We know that. The logic, the data says this process raises more money in capital campaign. It increases weekly giving and it increases estate gifts as well. So from a logic perspective, the cost is $0 more than the standard approach, the old-fashioned approach. It only takes a little bit more planning. It's just like gardening and planting tomatoes. It's not backbreaking or expensive or time consuming, just a little tiny bit of planning. So as we draw to a conclusion, Daryl, I welcome your final remarks, but this parish you have right in front of you, Holy Trinity, was a wonderful example that not only did we increase their capital giving from 2 million, the previous one, to 3.5 in this, offertory goes up, engagement goes up, volunteering, attendance, all those things that really matter. So Daryl, any last comments before we wrap it up?
Well, thank you for being a part of the webinar, and we would love to work with your church or parish We believe in this model. It's got, the logic and the data to support it. And we would like to be able to share those opportunities with you as we work together. So consider us. We would love to work with you.
Yes, we would like to. This is our life mission. We've been doing it forever. And even if you're not ready for a capital campaign, if you'd like some of these free resources, let us know. We will email out the webinar to you, and we give away everything that we have. It's free, and it's taken us decades to accumulate this knowledge base, but we're happy to share it with you. And give us a call. If you'd like this book, we'll send it to you for free. And we can also connect you with our stewardship system where you receive weekly resources for your stewardship efforts. So until then, I'd like to say thank you so much for joining us. Good luck and God bless. Bye-bye.
Thank you.